the application process to Princeton University was very extensive. And so it started in November, and I submitted my application in early November of my senior year of high school. And I had started working on the application over the summer of, so between junior year and senior year of high school. I started thinking about, what was I going to write? What was my college essay going to be? And then I finished my essays early and I gave them to my teachers in high school to look at. And so your teachers will be happy to look at your essays, especially if you're applying to very competitive universities like Princeton University. I would give I had a schedule for myself. So I made sure I was finished with my first draft of my college essays, in September or in October of my senior year of high school. And so at the start of October, I gave my essays to my teachers and they gave me feedback. And then I took that feedback and I worked on my essays again. And then I gave the essays again to my teachers. And so I worked I think a big part of my application was definitely, and a big part of your application that makes you stand out is not only your grades, your GPA, and your SAT scores and the numbers, but also your essays. I would encourage you to spend a lot of time working on your essays, showing them to your teachers, improving them so that because I think especially now at places like Princeton, your essays and your personal statements are becoming more and more important for college admissions. So I would encourage you to start early on writing your admissions essays, college admissions essays, and to show them to your teachers not only once but twice, and to make sure they're as good as you can get them to be. But after I submitted my essays, I did have an interview, and so it's very common among very selective universities to have alumni. And so I myself for Princeton University now conduct interviews for prospective students. And so as an alumnus, I'm given the opportunity. So I am often asked to interview these students on behalf of Princeton University for admission. And oftentimes I can tell you that these students are very accomplished, or are very capable, and it's really the students who are able to show me that they're passionate about their interests, about their academics, about their community, who are able to show me that they are not, are someone who is unique, someone who has an experience. And sometimes you may not even know that you are unique. For instance, you may be the first person in your community or in your family to attend college or try to attend or even apply to a place like Princeton. And that in of itself is a very unique thing, because places like Princeton don't have very many students who are the first in their family or community to go to Princeton. And so that in of itself is a very unique thing, even among students who apply. And so I would encourage you to think about one thing that really helped me while I was applying to Princeton. For instance, when I interviewed for Princeton, but even now when I conduct interviews on behalf of Princeton University, one of the things that helps is trying to understand how are you different from everyone else who is at Princeton or applying to Princeton. And the people who are at Princeton and applying to Princeton are people who come from are still people who come from a very privileged kind of specific background that is not sort of representative of kind of the diversity that I see in this room before me today. So I would encourage you to think about, how are you different from, everyone else who is applying to Princeton or at Princeton right now, and emphasize that. And that really helped me when I was applying to Princeton. And so oftentimes I do interview students from Essex County who apply to Princeton. And I'm asked to write an evaluation of the student after I conduct the interview. So I ask them about their extracurriculars. Oftentimes I don't really, I myself don't ask about their grades or their SAT scores, because that's something the university considers itself. But what they want, for example, when they ask, when you're when you're participating in an interview for admission, what is most important for me to understand is how would you make Princeton a better place? How would you make Princeton a more diverse place? How would you improve the community there? And I think, as I was saying, thinking about yourself, thinking about, you're all very unique people. Each one of you has very unique interests and very unique stories about your backgrounds, what motivates you to study, what brings you to applying to Princeton. And I think when I write my evaluation, what I try to emphasize is this is how this student would make a difference, would stand out at Princeton. And it's not, most of the time, it's not academically, but most of the time it really is sort of thinking about a person's experiences, Um, so for myself, what I think I tended to focus on was the fact that my family, we are sort of a family of immigrants, and so we came to the U.S. And we had a very specific story of immigration to the U.S. And so, speaking about that, thinking about, there are not a ton of other stories like my family or my story about immigrating to the U.S. that made a difference or made me special at Princeton. And so, thinking about that is a good way to thinking about when you're part of an interview, or when you're participating in an interview, thinking about yourself. How am I special? How do I stand out? And